Hello, welcome to the new episode of podcast Window to the World, Okno do sveta. My name is Miroslav Wlachovsky, and last year I served as a foreign minister of Slovakia, and currently I am associated with a think tank Globsecu. My today's guest is a good friend and a former colleague, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Austria, Alexandrom Schallenbergom.
Great to see you again, Miroslav, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you for hosting us here in Vienna, and I know that for you the foreign relations and diplomacy is a family trait. Your father was a great diplomat, you are a great diplomat, but I would like to ask you, what do you like about diplomacy, and on the other hand, what do you dislike about diplomacy? And if I may, you made this step from the diplomacy to politics. Is it a very different animal for you?
It is. I mean, politics is something quite different, and you have to have many more considerations in mind when you're a foreign minister. And I've not only been foreign minister, I had several postings in the government.
Yeah, which I've
but what I like, I mean, already as a small child, I was always interested in international relations, in history, and I was always intrigued. I grew up abroad. I grew up in Asia and in other countries in Europe. So this was always part of my life. And it's actually a strange phenomena that many foreign ministers, or quite a number of them, have been beforehand career diplomats. There are no other postings in governments where people actually were career, whatever, in the finance ministry or trade ministry and then became minister. That's a feature of foreign ministers to a certain degree. But you have to change. You have to become a politician. It's a quite different ballgame, and there's interior politics. I'm one of those who say there's no difference between inner politics, interior politics, and foreign policy. Anybody who says so is actually weakening foreign policy. Foreign policy is a part of politics in a country. It's a representation of interests, whether they're economic, whether they're security-wise, whether they're political, all comes together into one government policy.
Yeah, at one point you became a chancellor of Austria for a couple of months. So was it a complete change?
Yes. I mean, I always cite the former Chancellor Wolfgang Schüssel, who said once, you can be 10 years member of a parliament as a parliamentarian. You have no idea what it means to be minister. You can be 10 years minister. You have no idea what it means to be chancellor or prime minister. And he's right.
Okay. We have recently had European elections. How do you see the new European Parliament, and what does it mean for Austria, and what does it mean for Central Europe? I know that the ÖVP lost 2 mandates, but somehow it was expected because of we lived in a turbulent times when you've been foreign minister, but also when you've been chancellor. We had a COVID-19. It all has an impact on us. So how do you see the new European Parliament and the Central Europe in it?
Well, if I start with the European Austrian results, it was predicted that we will suffer losses. But actually the service went far beyond. I mean, they gave us 18%, 20%, and we ended up at 25%. They said that the Freedom Party, the right-wing party, would be far ahead, and now they're only 0.8% ahead of us. So, as often in past elections, surveys have gotten it wrong. And the biggest problem is that beforehand, they're treated as if they were the official result of elections, but they're not probably more valuable than weather forecasts to a certain degree by now. And the same goes actually for the European level. All the news were saying there will be a big move to the far right.
Yeah.
And the one group that has
general prediction.
Yeah, absolutely. But the one group who made, actually from the bigger fractions, which made a gain was the EPP.
Yeah.
So, and again, the move to the right, I always said, there's a wrong impression, because it gives the impression that this far right is somehow a monolithic bloc. It isn't. They are divided in many subgroups, and actually it's a question of logic. Nationalistic parties are not good in international cooperation. It's a logical issue. So they are divided among themselves. And the EPP has again proven to be the strongest force, and that's, from my perspective, obviously very good, because it's for me the standing constant of European integration. It's those parties who have carried, at least in Austria, always this European thinking, and it was finally the ÖVP who brought Austria with Alois Mock at the time, one of my predecessors, into the European Union. So not all is bad, and we have sometimes a tendency, and it was seen again ahead of the Euro elections, that in the public eye everything is scandalized, everything is a catastrophe. Europe will be far right. It isn't, and at the end of the day we always find out that all this kind of predictions, this kind of scaremongering, doomsday saying, is proven wrong, and we do it constantly, and we will probably have it again in the future.
Yeah. Whenever I talk with Americans, for example, they always remind me, you Europeans, you are such a doomsayers, and you see always the glass half empty than half full. You should be more. You should have more confidence in a bright future. I don't know. Maybe it's because of a series of crises which we faced in Europe. We tend to see the glass half empty rather than half full. I don't know.
But this is actually something which worries me a lot, and I constantly try to argue against it, because we have become, so to say, the continent of the doomsday sayers, and especially I would say Central Europeans and Austrians are very good at that. We always want to be in the top group.
Yeah, we have a competition who will be more skeptical.
Yeah, but and it has become a sort of intellectual sport as well. And I think it's dangerous, because it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yes, we had a succession of stress tests. We had a succession of unprecedented challenges. COVID, pandemic, we had the inflation, a bumpy road economically, war returned to this continent. We are surrounded by a ring of fire, if you look at the Sahel region, if you look at the Middle East. But actually, if you look at the last 4 years, all of these crisis moments, at the beginning, the general impression in Europe was, we won't cope with that, we won't get it, we won't be able to face it. And then we did. Who in the media or in the think tanks or anywhere in the public realm would have predicted on the 23rd of February, 2 years ago, that Europe will remain united in the face of the Russian aggression against Ukraine? Yeah. Probably nobody. Yeah. And we stood together, and we just adopted last Monday at the Council of Foreign Ministers in the European Union, again, the 14th package of sanctions against Russia, with everybody on board, including Hungary. Yeah. Nobody predicted that. At the beginning of the pandemic, we were never faced with a pandemic. We fared better than authoritarian systems like China. But we are the least ones to recognize that. We always say we are weak and we are disunited. And actually, if we look back at least the last 4 or 5 years, we should gain some self-confidence, because these were unprecedented challenges nobody foresaw, and we managed. And we managed not too badly. We did mistakes. Nobody is perfect. But all these doomsaying, all these, we are at the verge of a collapse, and Europe will be disunited, and we will fail, and we will have the biggest wave of insolvencies, and tourism will never come back. All these things we heard at the beginning of the pandemic, beginning of the war of Russia, they proved wrong. Wrong and again wrong.
If I remember it correctly, I think all of my life someone tells that the West is in decline, except for some short period in 90s when we were more optimistic. But I'm afraid that we are sending the bad message to our own public, but also the bad message abroad. And that means that, for example, one of the reasons why Russian President Putin felt that he can do the aggression towards Ukraine is that he thought the West is weak, and that we allowed Georgia, we allowed Crimea, so yeah. why not continue?
Yeah. And we surprised him. I sometimes say, half seriously, that he did one strategic mistake, the president of the Russian Federation. He read Western media and he believed them. And we are actually extremely good at belittling ourselves, at making our problems seem bigger and our capacities seem smaller. And I believe that is okay-ish if you want in a peaceful time. But if you are confronted with countries like China or Russia who actually want to change our model of life, who are challenging us actively, if we have in each and every of our countries trolls and bots and everything from Russia which are reinforcing all the stories which disunite our societies, which create problems, then that is dangerous if we continue down this road. And as you said, it's a bad signal to our own public and internationally. And I believe, I see at least myself, the job of a politician is to point to solutions and to give optimism. And there are reasons for optimism. The odds are on our side. Our free, pluralistic societies are still the most resilient and strongest societies on this planet. And you can say even no migrant on this planet wants to move to Russia and China. Everybody wants to move to the seemingly weak, disunited, and losing West. How come?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. They travel to Europe, or either to Europe or to United States.
Exactly.
But still, we face a deep crisis, and Russian aggression to Ukraine changed the security system of Europe, actually destroyed part of it. And where are we now? Where are we now after 2 years, in your view?
I believe, you know, if you say that we are in a crisis, I believe it's an intellectual crisis. Because we Europeans, and I always like to cite Robert Kagan, the US-American political scientist, who wrote nearly 20 years ago, Europeans are living in a post-historic paradise of peace, while outside the rules of power still apply. So actually, we thought after the fall of the Iron Curtain, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, we have won it. This grand clash of systems, market economy, democracy, rule of law, separation of powers, we have prevailed. And we actually thought afterwards that this will continue this way, that Francis Fukuyama to a certain degree is right, that we are at the end of history. And I read once briefly a short time ago a sentence I like, Europeans believed that they knew their future. Because we thought we'll always continue that way. Remember the times when we believed that Russia will move our way, Erdogan and Turkey will move the European way, and that our standards will become global standards.
Yeah, and the liberal democracy is something which all want to approach and
exactly. And we went around the planet lecturing everybody, even if they didn't want to listen, become like us. And we thought every rational human being on this planet wants to become like we are in the European Union. And now we found out, oh gosh, no, war is back, history is back. To a certain degree, the 30 years holidays from history are over. Fall of the Iron Curtain and the attack of Russia on Ukraine. So it was like a geostrategic ice bucket thrown in our face, and we are there where everybody else on this planet was beforehand. We thought pandemics, we will see them, you know, in other regions of the world. War, either in black and white pictures because they're from the past, or they're taking place on another continent. Everything is back now, and we feel, and that's why we are so challenged, because Europeans actually felt that we are an historic exception. Post-national, post-historic. And now we find out, oh gosh, we are not.
No,
so
it's all back.
That's the crisis moment, is an intellectual crisis moment. And what I'm mostly fighting against, and we talked about the doomsday saying and so on, is the intellectual self-abandonment. The first thing European intellectuals or politicians or many in the media and so on say, oh gosh, we are doomed. We are lost. We won't cope with that. And then we do actually, but there seems to be no learning curve. We did manage the pandemic. We did mistakes, yes, but we did manage. Our economies didn't fail completely. And we did manage with the energy crisis after the Russian attack. So let's take some strength out of it. Let's take some confidence out of the experiences. Is it a bumpy road? Yes, hell yes.
Even a pride.
But let's take some pride and confidence and say, gosh, we have faced unprecedented challenges. We haven't fallen apart. We haven't disintegrated. Our economies haven't melted down. Our market, you know, and let's say, okay, we have to work on getting it better, but at least have a bit of self-confidence and fight against this intellectual self-abandonment we are so much enjoying for the time being. You have the feeling in Europe. Sometimes you have the feeling Europeans already joyfully talk about the demise and the failing of Europe even before a crisis really arrived.
Well, we have to work on it, and I don't know where to start.
But I mean, to give you an example, when you go to international reunions like in Antalya or Raisina in the United Arab countries, or in India, Sirbani Yasa wanted to say in Raisina, there the question is, how do we manage our future? Then you go to Munich to the Security Conference. You go to Davos to the World Economic Forum. The question is, do we still have a future? You know, sorry. and this, and you mentioned before the Americans. I believe we should look at other planets, other countries, and take some optimism. We have still, I believe, the best system there is on this planet, and it's worthwhile fighting for it. We found out that it's not an automatic thing, that we actually have to fight to keep up human rights, democracy, pluralism, and it's not easy sometimes. But I want my grandchildren to grow up in a country as free and open as the Austria I grew up in. Mm-hmm. And it's, I believe, always worthwhile fighting for it. So it's a good time, even if it's difficult, it's a good time to be a politician.
Yeah, and we have this strange body called European Union, which unites nowadays 28 countries, and it's maybe difficult to manage, but at the end, it provides solutions. Yeah. And
but you forgot about the Brexit. It's 27 countries.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I like to forget it.
Yeah. I'm blocking it out sometimes too.
I was Slovak ambassador to UK before Brexit, and I like to keep that picture in my mind. It was more fun with them. Maybe they will reconsider at some point. We shall see it. The elections are coming.
Absolutely.
Actually, this is a crazy year when it comes to elections, and I was surprised by the term of British elections, but I was even more surprised by French elections, and we can come to it because that might be an interesting development. But I would like to ask you about the most recent Foreign Affairs Council, when you already mentioned that you adopted the 14th package of sanctions. What was in that package, and how do you evaluate the sanctions as a tool in itself? Because there are some colleagues which are very skeptical about sanctions. For example, our Hungarian colleague Peter Szijjártó, he always mentioned that sanctions didn't work, and so on and so on. But obviously, when we are able to prepare the 14s and adapt to the 14s, something must be working.
I mean, the most important part, and we do have the most substantive and far-reaching sanctions regime in place ever applied to a third country in the history of the European Union. And the 14th package, the most important part, is the delivery via European ports of LNG gas, liquefied gas of Russia. So this is sanctioned from now on. But I mean, we have, and to a certain degree, our Hungarian colleague is right, because we always have to think what is the substance of the sanctions, what is the aim. And I believe sometimes the European public gets it wrong, because they believe sanctions are there to create peace. They're not. They're exactly that, restrictive measures to show very clearly that you are not in accordance, that you dislike a certain development, and to try, it's like a nudging, trying to force a country to change a course of action. Sanctions have never been used to create peace, so that's a misconception. And we all know that sanctions are only as effective as the bigger the group of countries applying them, the more effective they are. And the biggest issue we are having is that countries circumventing these sanctions.
Absolutely.
We have seen some dual-use goods were on the sanctions list, suddenly over 1,000% increase of exports from Europe to certain third countries, and we know that none of them remains in the third countries. They're used to be sold to Russia again. But we know that Russia is actually a country, and that it's something that we shouldn't be joyful about, but it's a country that has, actually the president of Russia has made sure that Russia is losing out economically in an incredible way. I mean, they're now overheating, they're putting all the efforts in the war machine. Recent talks with China have been extremely disappointing from a Russian point of view, and to a certain degree, Russia has belittled itself. It has become less meaningful in a certain sense because of the actions it had taken and because of the sanctions. The European Union was the most important trade partner for Russia. And up to now, they have not achieved any kind of as reliable and as a customer, if you want to, as we were in the past. So Russia has done, or the president of the Russian Federation has done a lot of harm to the people of Russia, actually. They don't feel it yet, maybe now, but they will feel it sooner or later.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I remember I visited Russia and I visited Kremlin in 2000, and I was surprised how much they. It was at the time before we joined EU and NATO in 2004, and they were thinking about the West as a potential strategic challenger and the enemy, and I was surprised by that, because by my analysis, I think the bigger challenges for Russia are either to south of Russia or east of Russia, but and I'm afraid that they will face it. They will face it now because they created a crisis which they do not know the consequences yet, and I think it's not shooting itself in the foot, but somewhere much higher. And, but Russia is now closed system, autocratic system, and it's really hard to reach informationally.
And they have
Russian
now the fact that yesterday
people.
they announced to kick out 81 Western broadcasting and news institutions, is
including
another fact.
ORF, which was absolutely big surprise for me.
OE24 is actually unacceptable, but it shows in which direction the current regime in Russia is pushing the whole population. They don't want only the Russian population to have access to any kind of viable and objective information, but actually, sooner or later, we'll try to prevent any journalist working out from Russia to tell people internationally what is actually going on in this country. So this is, if you're weak, you close yourself, and Russia is closing itself for the time being intellectually.
Let's move to another topic which was very frequent at the time when I was your colleague at the Foreign Affairs Council, but which is even more frequent now, and that's enlargement. For a couple of years there was not that much talk about enlargement of the European Union. I think the Russian aggression changed also that we realized for ourselves that we have to finish the job, and we have to create a even bigger union, and now the Ukraine and Moldova will start negotiations, but also both your country and my country, we have a great interest in the Western Balkans. How big is this for you?
I believe, from my perspective, and you're absolutely right, the Russian attack on Ukraine was, so to say, an ice bucket thrown in our face, a geopolitical wake-up moment. And we found out that we have to deal with our neighborhood. The equation is very simple. Either we manage to export stability and security, or we risk importing insecurity and instability. And the neighborhood is not only the East, and you know that Austria and Slovakia are one of those countries which are pushing very hard to have Southeastern Europe, the so-called Western Balkans, to have them high on the agenda as well. And I believe this is the most important geostrategic test for the European Union. If we don't manage in our neighborhood, then let's forget about the Middle East, North Africa, and the rest of this planet. This is our homework. We have to do it. Not the Americans, not anybody else. This is our homework. And there's no vacuum in politics. It's either our model of life, which sort of has a success in these countries, or we will sooner or later be confronted suddenly with alternative models. And that cannot be to our liking. We are sitting both now in Vienna. 500 kilometers to the east from here is Ukraine. 500 kilometers to the south is Bosnia-Herzegovina. So both are immediate neighborhoods. And we have to work into both directions. I'm very happy that we managed now to open accessions with Ukraine and Moldova. But I want to see the same thing, and I'm happy that we have conference, an intergovernmental conference with Montenegro too, that we're advancing, but I want to see an opening of the accession negotiations with Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have to show very clearly that there's not a two-class society. That we don't have a system among the candidate countries, which is a little bit like George Orwell Animal Farm. Some candidates are more, all candidates are equal, but some candidates are more equal than others.
Yeah.
This would be geostrategically extremely stupid. And I just last Friday, I had all the ministers of the Western Balkan here in Austria, plus the group I created 1 year ago, the Friends of the Western Balkan. And Slovakia is part of it, Austria, and 5 other EU member states. And they all came together, all ministers. And we are that country, those countries which within the European Union are pushing the Western Balkans agenda. And again, I believe this is our biggest geostrategic test. And talk about the Western Balkans. You look at the European map. This is not a neighborhood, actually. Actually, it's the patio, it's the inner courtyard. It's surrounded by EU member states.
Absolutely.
Greece, Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia, and so on, and Hungary. So all the problems and challenges of this region are our problems and challenges. And we should
can't isolate it.
European integration is incomplete without this region. It's as easy as that.
And our Balkan friends, will they make it easier for us?
Well,
you speak with them more often now.
Yeah, I do a lot, and my message actually to them is the most important intellectual task. They will have to do reforms, and it will remain a merit-based process, the enlargement. And I would hope that they use Ukraine, so to say, as a carrier rocket. You know, Ukraine has pushed open the doors, and I want the Balkans not to fall apart and be on the, the service lane while Ukraine and Moldova are on the fast track. So they have to work, they have to do reforms. But the most important political, intellectual message we have to send them is don't let yourself be taken hostage by your own history. Because this sentence, the Balkans create more history than they can chew, is actually completely wrong. We both come from countries, Central Europe is just as rich in history. We have fought wars, we have created disasters, even on a global scale to a certain degree, if you want to, and we overcame it. We share history in the good and bad times, and now we're together members of the European Union, and we overcame the issues we had, historic issues. And we could all run around within the European Union arguing about what was done and the injustice of the Second World War and afterwards and so on and so forth. We moved forward because we said, this is the situation now, deal with it now and move and look to the future. And the message to the Western Balkans is don't let yourself be hostage, be taken hostage by your own history. I'm Austrian foreign minister. I could go walk around and being actually really mad at everybody. If we look at Austria before the First World War, before 1918 and afterwards, we have Alto Adige, South Tyrol, we have Sopron, we have all these issues. Yeah. But no, we got over it, and look at us now. We are one of the 12 richest countries on this planet with social security, social peace, and that is actually the message we have to give to our Western Balkan friends.
Yeah, but the difference is that you looked forward, you look in front of you, and you don't look that much back. And because when you look too much back, then you make a mistake.
That's the problem we have to get across, and it's not a done deal, not at all. The Western Balkans will keep us busy, but they're actually, I mean, we have lost a lot of credibility as European Union. We promised them 20 years ago, you will become one day members of the European Union. And where do we stand 20 years later? Did one of those countries become member? No. So this is the longest process we ever had. And no wonder we already see surveys in the Western Balkans where already a relative majority is not in favor of the EU anymore.
Yeah.
Where we are standing in a competition with China, Russia, and others. And that should actually ring all the alarm bells in Europe. Because this is part of us. This is surrounded by EU member states, as I said beforehand. This cannot be an island, within the European Union.
And we are by far the biggest investor.
The biggest investor, trade partners, everything. We have a strong human bond. We have in Austria 500,000 people with migration background from the former Yugoslav countries. Yeah. And culturally, we share the same history, So there are these reasons, and we have to stand by them. We have to regain our credibility and show them that we actually do mean business, and that if they fulfill the criteria, they will become members. But I would go even a step further, if I may. I believe we have to rethink enlargement in very basic terms. The fact that we had up to now this kind of binary thinking. You're either 0, meaning not member, or 1, full member. And there's nothing in between, basically. I believe that's wrong. And Austria, as you know, together with others, is championing the gradual integration, meaning we cannot wait another 10 years to have these countries still waiting outside. Wherever they're in parts where they're ready to adapt to the common laws, where they're capable of having a judicial overview and so on, we should take them in and treat them like member states. On different EU agencies, part of the common market, research policies, trans-European networks. I mean, I always say any highway, any railroad in the Western Balkans at the end of the day is linking 2 EU member states with each other. Croatia, Greece, Bulgaria, Croatia, and so on. How come we let other countries build them? How come they're not part of the European, trans-European network policies, as full members of this part? Nothing prevents us from doing that. We could have them even more often in our foreign policy deliberations. We want them to align to our foreign policies, but we don't give them an opportunity to see what our reasoning is. How do we achieve a certain, declaration or decision? They could be as observers in the room.
Yeah,
nothing prevents us with a little bit more fantasy to give them the feeling that they are members, and it has a benefit because not only they will feel it on the public, but we will show to third countries, listen, these guys are Europeans. They're part of our family, one way or another, not yours, ours.
And when you go really deep into it, even when you are full member of the EU, there are a different kind of membership because there is a different depth of integration. It's different when you are part of the Eurozone. It's
Absolutely.
Different when you are part of a Schengen.
Yeah. So we already have a multi-layered European integration, and I know the thinking is, when I worked in Brussels, the thinking was very much, everybody was mad at the opt-outs from Denmark and London because they made things so complicated. But I said, the world is complicated. And you cannot have one size fits all. And everybody has to be, either abide by 100% or you're completely out. Geostrategically, that doesn't make sense. We know, for instance, if we talk about Ukraine, agricultural policy will be a hurdle, will be an enormous obstacle. Do we have to wait until we have solved that? No. I would say no. Try to bring them into certain parts of the common market. Try to bring them into certain EU agencies. You can co-opt them on common foreign and security policy. So we can treat them in the eyes of third countries like an EU member state, although they're not fully part of every piece of the common market. Nothing prevents us from that. So the world is complicated, so the European Union has to be a little bit complicated and diverse as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the opt-outs. I was ambassador to Denmark when they... Actually, it was interesting because I was in the UK before the Brexit, and then I moved to Denmark. And before Brexit, my conservative friends, the Conservative Party, told me that Denmark will be next. And I came to Denmark, and they completely rejected the Brexit because they became scared. And when Putin attacked Ukraine, they saw it as a great opportunity to get rid of an opt-out because they were limiting. It was limiting themselves. So I mean, sometimes countries get gradually to more integration.
Absolutely.
And we have to give them a space.
We simply have to apply a little bit more fantasy and be ready to overcome old concepts. I believe we are misjudging enlargement because we're using it, or we are looking at it like a legalistic procedural thing. Actually, it's a geostrategic tool. And actually, we should go back to where our forefathers were. When Greece joined in 1981, the European communities at the time, it was to strengthen a young democracy. It was not about their acquis communautaire and whether they can apply every piece of it and every comma. Spain 86, and Portugal the same thing. Spain had 4 years earlier a coup d'etat, a tried coup d'etat. Would we today be ready to take in a country which only 4 years earlier had a coup d'etat? Well, probably you would find all skeptical voices in the European Union. But it was a geostrategic thing. Safeguard, strengthen a young democracy. And if we had applied the same logic to the big enlargement of 2004, where we're celebrating today 20 years of Slovakia's and others' accessions, probably we would still not be in the European Union if we applied the same logic we're applying now to the Western Balkans. And some of these countries might be now under the influence of other countries, let's say Russia or China. So it would weaken us. So enlargement is the most important geostrategic tool, and actually a tool to strengthen us.
And I would also mention the case of Austria. It also take a while. You became the EU member because we have to wait till the end of Cold War, I guess.
Yeah,
partly.
yeah. Actually, the fun thing is most people believe that we applied for accession before the Iron Curtain fell. So it was in springtime, and then in November the Iron Curtain fell. Our biggest issue was
for that.
No, I was a young student at the time, but our point was we wanted to join already the European communities actually in the 60s. And at the time we got a veto from Rome because of Alto Adige, South Tyrol. We hadn't settled that one. And Russia was, the Soviet Union was very skeptical at the time. But we wanted to become already member, and we were, because we didn't get it, we were member of the EFTA, the European Free Trade Association, where UK and all the others were. And so we were already pretty far in our access to European communities. But our application was before the Iron Curtain fell, and then it was a perfect timing. And we got in with Sweden and Finland at the same time.
Let's move to our bilateral relations, Slovak-Austrian relations.
This will be a very short topic. They're perfect.
That would be most wonderful, but I would go a bit deeper into it. Perhaps we are the most unknown neighbor of Austria, because until 1989 we were part of Czechoslovakia, we were behind the curtain. So how the Austrians perceive Slovakia and Slovaks nowadays?
Well, I mean, actually very friendly, but you have pointed to a thing which is true. Very good relations, very friendly, and Bratislava and Vienna, the closest capitals in Europe together, and people love to go to and fro. We have thousands, tens of thousands of Slovakians who drive over the border to work here. Extremely important for certain parts like health business and otherwise.
Absolutely.
Austrians have the business in Bratislava. So extremely close, and I'm hopeful that in the next couple of years it will even be possible to come from Vienna and Bratislava at the same time it took in 1918. We're not there yet. It still takes a couple of minutes longer today than it took in 1918 to get from Vienna to Bratislava.
Oh my.
But yeah, pointed to one thing which is right. There's not a lot of knowledge, but it is not limited to Slovakia. I believe that sometimes we take neighbors for granted. What do people actually know about Switzerland, apart from public perceptions but about politics? What is going on there? What is the public debate in Slovakia or in Prague or in Ljubljana? Actually, people don't really know, and that's why I believe that we can offer something as foreign ministers, and that for me neighborhood policy is something extremely important. There was a time when people thought we have to talk to Africa, Asia, and others, and neighbors. Come on, we see each other every month in Brussels. And here again, the pandemic suddenly showed us neighborhood matters. We need them. We are dependent. Open borders, exchange, economic, people, everything. And that brought us actually closer together. But you're right, we should not neglect that we always have to do a lot of explaining too. I cannot expect every Slovakian to know things going on in Austria or any friends in the Czech Republic. So we do have to do some diplomatic work and explanations there too, to explain what is going on nationally, what are our politics, maybe especially now ahead of the Austrian elections, very important, because there might be some wrong rumors about what is going on in Austria abroad.
there is one issue which you mentioned, that a lot of Slovaks nowadays work in Austria. Actually, a lot of Slovaks live in Austria. They decided that for them it will be good to have a house or a flat in neighboring parts of Austria, in Hainburg, in Wolfstal, other places, Kríze, and so on. And the big shock came for them with pandemic, because then we closed the borders.
Exactly.
And it was really difficult for them. But since the pandemic and since the migration issue became a big topic in several European countries, we didn't enjoy very much the Schengen. What we can do to have a really Schengen borders in a way that it's free without control.
I mean, I know you're referring to the fact that Austria has temporary controls on the border. We're trying to implement them in such a way that they're the least, obstructive to the free trade and commerce and movement of people. But my picture of Schengen is like a big house, and every apartment owner agreed to get rid of his apartment door, in the belief that the front door is protected.
Yeah.
So we found out that the front door is not protected. So now a third of our Schengen countries have border controls. Germany to Poland, Czech Republic, Switzerland, and Austria since 2015. Germany was the first country to do that. Sweden to every neighboring state, France to every neighboring state, we to you guys, Slovenia. So that is actually a sign that Schengen is not quite working, because countries have the feeling that they have to protect themselves and have at least temporary borders. And I tell you, we had 2 years ago 112,000 asylum applications in Austria, the biggest number for any country in continental Europe per capita. If it were the same number in relation to the population, Germany would have been over 1 million asylum applications. That's what we got. 75% of them were not previously registered. That means they have been walking or driving or whatever through half of Europe, crossing probably 4 to 6 states, including EU member states, and nobody took the fingerprints, nobody took the personal data, while a war is raging 500 kilometers away from here. So this is a security issue.
Absolutely.
It's not a migration issue, it's also truly a security issue. And I believe people expect states to have a say and control who is actually entering the territory. And we have, to a certain degree, lost this control. The front door is not sufficiently protected, and we want this front door to be protected. We are ready to support any of the front countries, like Bulgaria, Italy, and others. They need our support.
Greece,
It should be Greece as well. It should be a European community policy to finance the external border management these countries have. Think about when Lukashenko weaponized migration, and he sent Iraqis, thousands of them, to the Lithuanian border. They believed they were in Germany or something. It was actually the Lithuanian taxpayer who was financing the fence they had to build in order to protect themselves. But actually they were protecting us. And so this should be a community policy financed by the community. But it took us years to convince the Commission to get there. And I hope now with this asylum and migration package, things are slowly moving into the right direction. But we recently just saw a video from Mannheim with the stabbing with a knife. Horrible. We have again and again stuff like that coming out from Paris, from Germany, from other countries, even Austria sometimes from time to time. And it shows that we have been naive in the past. We have people in our countries who are not ready to integrate. We have a problem with sending those who don't have a right of asylum back to the country of origin. And we have to get a lot tougher on that. People expect us to do that, and we have to get tougher. The systems we have put in place were actually meant for the former communist countries, for those fleeing, going over the Berlin Wall to flee to the free West. But these rules are not adapted to the current situation. And we know that the migration pressure will never end. Luckily, to a certain degree, because as long as we are successful, we are attractive.
Absolutely.
So people want to come to Europe to find a better future. you cannot argue with them. Probably we too would do the same thing. But we have to make a difference between economic migration, where we have the blue card, where we have the red, white, red card for Austria, and asylum. For the time being, is completely mixed up. And among the highest numbers in Austrians in the past year were Indians, Tunisians, Moroccans. Why would they ever get asylum? The number of recognition for asylum status is minimal for them. So actually it's an economic migration we have. And in the future we'll have a climate migration. And we have to be prepared for that now.
Yes, I agree, and we have to put our own house into order. If we want to keep Europe, we have to make sure that our people are secure and the front door works properly.
Yeah, absolutely. And we Austrians, remember when we joined, one of the biggest slogans was actually better together than alone. But if people have the feeling, those who are outside have it easier to manage, the migration flows because they simply close the borders and so on, it would undermine, as you say rightly, would undermine the common European project we are having. So this is the project. Europe integration is about security, so it has to deliver. The problem with migration is it's a policy or area of effectiveness. You always have 3, 4, 5 countries being affected, and the others are sitting by and watching, because they are not affected by migration. Nobody's coming to them, or they don't want it. As long as this is the case, we will have growing problems. And yes, we know, we Austrians, it's like Germany and the Scandinavian countries, we are the prime targets for people coming to Europe. That's why we are so adamant and loud in asking the support of our EU partners to manage this issue. We have to manage it urgently. We have gotten a lot better. The numbers this year have gone very low now because we became strict. We imposed border controls. It's not good, but it was a kind of self-defense measure. Because if you have numbers reaching tens of thousands a year, and the problem is, it's not about asylum. You have to integrate them. The integration is like a marathon. It takes years, and is extremely costly. So, and
no one guarantees the result.
Absolutely, absolutely. But that is the biggest issue I believe we have in the European Union now.
You are facing elections soon in Austria. We will have elections, we already mentioned, in France, and then we will have a big elections at the end of the year or in November in the US. All will affect us. How does it look like now in Austria? What are the biggest topic for this Euro elections? Is it migration? Is it economic situation?
I would say the biggest topic is, in a larger sense, security. Migration being an important part of it. But in general, the sense that our world has become less secure, Europe has become less secure. All this news coming from the Middle East, coming from the Sahel zone, coming from Ukraine, is sort of making people nervous. And then we have migration, we have climate change, and all these things. So it's security in the larger sense, at the center, absolutely migration, and then also, I would say, to a certain sense, the economic prospects. But that is the second subject. It's always the economy stupid, as Bill Clinton said it. So these are certainly the driving factors. I'm pretty actually optimistic as far as the results are concerned, me as being member of the ÖVP, the Conservative Party, that we have fared not as bad as people believed or wished for, depending on your point of view, and in the elections. And I believe we have a very good chance to be number one and have the Austrian Chancellor being a member of the ÖVP also in the future, which for the stability and continuity in this country would be important from my point of view.
Yes, because what is on the other side is quick populistic quasi solutions, and it's always a challenge, and we see it all around Europe. Actually, there was a big fear that the populistic parties will win a great majority or will make a big results during the European elections. It doesn't seem the case, so I hope we shall see something similar in case of Austrian elections. You lived in France for a long time, and you know that environment quite well. Why does Emmanuel Macron call these snap elections? It's puzzle for many people.
And it was a surprise. It was a real surprise. But I believe I didn't discuss it with Emmanuel Macron. But he is somebody who has again and again surprised people. And his thinking, I presume, was in party politics, if I now drag on with this system, and after the EU elections, it won't get worse. So let's make it quick and see where we stand. I cannot judge how reliable the surveys are that you can read in international media or in French media. But we might be in for change there. But still, I want to make a basic point, because we have elections in the US, we have elections here, in Austria, we have in France, UK, and so on. I'm very critical of all those articles or think tanks, whatever, that seem to indicate to a certain degree, oh gosh, elections are a source of instability and insecurity. And say, guys, get real. Elections are a central part of our democratic constitution. So let's stop doing the bidding of the Chinese and Russia and say, oh, elections are actually bad. And you have sometimes a feeling, if you read articles, that someone say, we'd be better off if we didn't have elections in the US. We'd be better off if we didn't have elections in France. This is dangerous, because this is part of our democracy. And it's a correction mechanism, of course. And change is part of our strength. We can adapt, we can evolve. Authoritarian systems cannot. And we saw it in China during COVID, that although we made mistakes and it was trial and error, we do have the capacity in our democratic pluralistic societies to have this trial and error. Autocracies don't. And I believe that's why I'm so adamant in saying, let's stop treating elections as a source of insecurity and instability. It is what we stand for. It is the central part of our model of life, and it brings changes. You might like them or not like them, but then again, in a couple of years, change will come back again. So let's keep our cool, let's keep our calm, and let's not do the bidding of those who actually want to challenge our model of life. I completely agree with you, and we are approaching the end of our episode, but I usually ask my guests for some recommendations on a literature, if you have some book which is connected to the topics we discussed in mind, or if you have something in the area of international relations. I have one book and one author I cite a lot recently. It's Charles Popper, the British-Austrian philosopher, and his book, Open Societies and Its Enemies. Okay. The general thinking is, if you have to become intolerant against intolerance, otherwise you lose the tolerance. And that's something we have to learn in our societies. In order to safeguard and protect our pluralism and liberalism, we have to be intolerant against those who actually challenge our systems. And the second, I would say, a book I really appreciated a lot, well, there are many obviously, is Peter Frankopan, The New Silk Road. Very good book, very good read. A page turner, they would say, probably on the back. I see. But it is actually on the history of the Silk Road, and his theories, you might agree with it or not, that it will become again, after 3 or 4 centuries where North Atlantic was sort of the center of gravity between the United States and Europe, that the Silk Road will again be a dominant part, not in the Chinese sense of Belt and Road, but simply the Central European, Central Asian belt, reaching from the Mediterranean to China, that it will be again a very dominant center of gravitation on the planet. And it's a very interesting read through the history of this part of the region. Yeah, we have same hobbies. History is one of them, and I agree. Without that knowledge, or without the appreciation of history lessons, we can't move forward in the right direction. Fully agree. Thank you very much for being a guest of my podcast, and I hope we will have the privilege to have you back at some point. Thank you very much for this invitation. It was a treat. I really enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you. All the best.